Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Tuesday the 14th of May 2019 and tonight's topic is Bill Barr appoints U.S. Attorney John Durham to examine the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. Now, this news broke late yesterday and it seems to be significant, and we're going to go through what it might mean, and we're going to examine the players, give you a little background on this new attorney who's looking into the origins of the Trump-Russia probe. If we have time later, we'll get into some crypto stories. If not, if we're running over, I want to leave some time to get your comments. So any comments you have on this topic or any other topic you want my attention, type them in the comment section, SMAULGLD. So I'm sure to see it and I can call out your comment. So Bill Barr appoints U.S. Attorney John Durham. Now, why is he appointing a U.S. attorney to look into this when there's already an Inspector General's report that is due in the next couple of weeks, and that is from Inspector General Horowitz? First, we need to know the difference between an Inspector General and a U.S. attorney. The Inspector General is really somebody who looks at internal machinations, makes recommendations. Here's what's happening in the department. Here's what we like. Here's what we don't like. But he doesn't have any indicting power. He doesn't have any, or she, any ability to subpoena people to testify. Essentially, all he can do, or she can do, in this case, it's a he. We've got our genders. I'm not going to go through 57 of them, but is to interview people that work at the department. So by definition, if people have left the department, there may be gaps in the Inspector General's report. If you recall, the Inspector General Horowitz put out a very detailed report on the Hillary Clinton email investigation, its origins, and how it was handled. And he found some significant issues in how it was handled. He found evidences, we saw the struck page emails, of bias, although he concluded that in the conduct of their investigation, their bias did not interfere. Now, some can disagree with that, but I think also out of there came a criminal referral for the deputy under Comey, who was the head of the FBI, Andrew McCabe. So there was a criminal referral that did come out of that. And it was not a very flattering report. But again, it did not go after anyone. It just showed that the way they handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation was sloppy. What Comey did at the end of it by laying out all the evidence against her and then not making a charge. There were two issues with that. First of all, if you're not going to make a charge, then you don't lay out all the against the protocol. It's prejudicial to the person you're investigating to throw all the bad evidence out there and not bring a charge, because you've now slandered them in a sense. If you're going to bring the charge, you bring the charge. Second thing is, the Department of the Federal Bureau of Investigation doesn't bring charges. They investigate and they refer those charges to the Department of Justice. At the time would have been the head of the DOJ, U.S. Attorney Loretta Lynch. So those are the types of things that an Inspector General's report can come up with, and that's the power that the Inspector General has. Now, Inspector General Horowitz is going to issue a report on the origins of the Mueller probe, well, not the Mueller probe, the Russia-Trump probe, and potential FISA abuse. Now, the same issue happens there, is that he's not necessarily going to have access to everyone to interview. He can't impanel grand juries. All he can do is talk to people and determine whether proper protocols were followed in the conduct of that investigation. Now, a lot of the same players that were involved in the Hillary Clinton email investigation were also those that were on the team that was also investigating the Trump-Russia, that's what happens when you get an R, Trump-Russia collusion investigation. So, why would Barr Now, if you've got the Inspector General looking at all this stuff, why would Barr hire or appoint an attorney to look into this as well? Well, probably because Barr has now been the Attorney General for a while. He's had consultations with Horowitz probably, and he probably knows, either he's seen the entire report or he's seen drafts of it, and he knows enough now to think that perhaps there are issues that may rise to the level of criminal behavior that may need to create indictments. Now, all this came about because prior to Barr all being appointed, all of the legal work that was being done at the Department of Justice was done on behalf of looking into whether Trump had colluded with Russia. Now, in the Trump colluding with Russia investigations, first it started under the Obama administration. So obviously you have an Obama Department of Justice, and they're looking into this, and they're running the FBI, they're running the Department of Justice, and they look into this. When Trump becomes president, Comey creates a situation after he got fired to create a special counsel to look into Trump-Russia collusion and Trump obstruction of justice by the mere fact that he was fired. Now, generally, when you have a new president, the new Department of Justice, a new FBI head possibly, not necessarily, but for example, when Bill Clinton came in, he fired all the attorney generals in the Department of Justice, which he's entitled to do. When Trump came in, this investigation was still ongoing. It had started back in, some say, the fall of 2016. Some say it started back further than that. But in any event, it was continuing while he was president. And he appointed Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who, upon becoming Attorney General, said, "I'm recuse myself." And he effectively was out of the picture, which put Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, in place. And he then appointed the special counsel. Now, some people ask, what's the difference between a special counsel, an IG, and an U.S. attorney? Well, we know the IG, the Inspector General, is someone who is really just an internal, not necessarily a watchdog, but somebody who analyzes and inspects what goes on and then makes a recommendation. A U.S. attorney is someone who has full prosecutorial reign, can investigate, impanel grand juries, subpoena people. The only difference between a special counsel is that's a creature of statute, which still works for the Department of Justice. That's what people didn't understand, that Mueller was, in a sense, reporting to Trump indirectly, and that's why Trump could have fired him. What a special counsel is someone who needs to be appointed because there may be a conflict within the department. So if Trump is under investigation, his own attorney general that he appoints can't investigate him. So what they do is they appoint a special counsel. So that's really the only difference. So John Durham has now been appointed, not as special counsel, because there's no conflict, to look into the origins of the Russia probe. And apparently he's been doing this for a while. And I suspect it's because Barr has seen part of, or has had conversations with Horowitz, the Inspector General, to realize that there's probably something going on. Now, a short note here is anyone who's been following the Russian hoax, as some call it, for some time knows that there's plenty of materials. It's not like there are materials that have to be found through extreme investigative prowess. A lot of these materials have been received just as part and parcel of congressional investigations. We've part of the materials that are turned over from time to time through Freedom of Information Act, and also just from interviews from congressmen and senators who have seen the materials, and a lot of these materials have been made public. But what's happened over the past couple of years is there has been an assumption that everything that was done looking into Trump-Russia collusion had an adequate predicate that, of course, Trump must have colluded with Russia because the FBI and the DOJ are investigating it. So now it's just a matter of putting all the pieces together and then bringing the indictment and then impeaching Trump and getting rid of the Russian traitor. That's essentially how most of the media covered the story, was that there was an investigation into Trump, and obviously the Department of Justice and the FBI, they're the premier law enforcement, they understand this stuff, and if they're investigating this, then there must be something there. Now, generally, that would be a proper assumption, that for the most part, unless you believe that all law enforcement is inherently corrupt and 9 times out of 10 does the wrong thing and just goes after people for no reason other than either they don't like them, they have political differences with them, or they just feel like getting somebody in trouble. If that was the view, then people would not have believed the potential that Trump colluded with Russia. However, if you listen to most of the mainstream media reports, most people that watch those reports, they believe that. Because why else would the Department of Justice, the FBI, be looking into this? And also, if you dislike Trump, you figure, well, that's another reason to be against him. He's a Russian traitor. He's colluding with Russia. Unfortunately, there's also been, it's not like there's been hidden information that tells another side of the story, i.e., that perhaps there wasn't a proper predicate for looking into Trump for any Russia collusion. And all that information has been out there. Going back to why did the FBI determine that they needed to investigate Trump? Well, they say, well, they went and they got a warrant. They got a FISA warrant. They went to the Foreign Intelligence Court and they presented evidence. And of course, they know what they're doing. This is what law enforcement does. This is what the FBI does. They gather intelligence. They bring it to the court. It's very serious if you bring that kind of stuff to a court. It's like getting a search warrant. And they had presented evidence that they got a court to sign off on 4 times, starting with James Comey presenting the evidence. But the problem is that there's been much information out there, that the information that they provided, not only in accordance with what people have seen, but even in James Comey's own words and sometimes contradictory testimony, either to Congress or to news media outlets, that the information that they relied on in order to get the warrant came from this gentleman, Christopher Steele, who put together a, quote, dossier, the famous Steele dossier. And in that document, there were unverified bits of information that he, under oath, said he can't verify. It's raw intelligence, and in many instances, it's made up. And I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of what I've heard is in that document, but a reporter whose full-time job it is, you would think would be all over this, and would say, oh, well, let's just make sure that our assumption is correct, that there was some valid reason to be looking into Trump, rather than just assuming, yeah, we don't like Trump, so here's what they're doing, here's how they're going to get him, and never once questioning, do they really have a case? Just assuming it's Mueller time and he's going down, and then getting former Obama administration people to go on and hire them as commentators like Brennan and Clapper so that they can spew their hatred. And of course you say, well, this is the former head of the CIA, the former head of the National Intelligence Service, whatever agency they're from, or Comey, the former head of the FBI. And they're telling you that this is all on the up and up. So you say, sure. But you still would think that a reporter, if they see that there is ample evidence that perhaps this wasn't done, quote, by the book. But we didn't see any the only investigation you saw were independent researchers and Fox News. Now, people say, oh, it's Fox News, it's fake, they have a political agenda. Well, that's quite possible. But that doesn't mean that if there's 2 sides to a story, you still don't look at the other side. And apparently there's a lot there that would indicate that there was no reason to put a full-on investigation into the Trump campaign. From what they say, the origins of this was, and first of all, the way they got the FISA warrant, there's not enough information because Comey has said that, well, the Steele dossier was not the primary basis for getting the warrant. There was other stuff. Well, many people who have seen the FISA warrant, unredacted and redacted, have said that that is the bulk of the information that was presented. But the other information that was in the report were news reports. And you said, well, see, this must have been widespread. Everybody knew that Donald Trump was colluding with the Russians. The problem with that is it's been established that those news reports were generated on the basis of Christopher Steele giving the news reporters the dossier for them to write the report. So it's kind of a circular argument where Steele has unverified information, God knows where he got it from, puts it in a dossier, gives it to the investigators, also gives it at the same time to the media. The media writes about it, and then the FBI says, on the basis of media reports and this dossier, we want to get a warrant. Now, none of it's been verified. Now, you would think that it wouldn't be 2.5 years later that now you'd have to have a new attorney general looking at this. You would have thought the media would have been all over this, but they have not been. What they've done instead is they've gone after Barr for suggesting all of this. Now, this guy, John Durham, let's talk about who he is. This is quite interesting. He is an attorney, as we mentioned. He's a U.S. attorney from Connecticut, I believe, appointed by Trump in 2017. I think he was unanimously approved to the position. And he had been appointed back in 1998, I believe, by Janet Reno, who was appointee of Bill Clinton, to look into some very suspect circumstances back in the 70s and 80s in Boston. Anyone who's seen the movie, I think it's The Departed and Black Mass, dealing with Whitey Bulger. Now, Whitey was a Boston mobster who apparently had corrupted the FBI in Boston. He had some local, the Yachty or whatever they're called, the local Irish hoodlums. One of them was in the FBI working in the field office, and somehow they corrupted the people in the FBI there. Now, Mueller, at the time, Robert Mueller, was the U.S. attorney for Boston, for the Boston area. And they took Whitey Bulger, and what they did was, in order to go after the Italian mafia, they used Whitey Bulger as an informant. Now, Whitey Bulger claims his whole life he was never an informant, he was not a rat and so on. It's hard to tell what was going on, but it does seem that the Boston FBI acted very suspiciously in protecting Whitey Bulger, and people would get arrested and they would not get released from jail. And Mueller knew about this, and it was all seemed to be some type of corruption. And there was a high-profile guy that went down in the FBI for essentially working with the Bulger mob. And Mueller was the guy at the time, and John Durham was the attorney who worked on this particular case. So Durham is a guy who is, his career, let me see, I have some words here about him. He's led numerous public corruption probes, including organized crime, government misconduct. That's what we're talking about here, financial fraud matters. So he's supposedly looking into these so-called matters with the investigation into Trump-Russia collusion. This kind of shocked people. I guess it shocked the Democrats and it shocked the media. A couple of weeks ago, when Bill Barr went to the Congress and the Senate to give testimony. And Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire was talking to Bill Barr. And listen to what Bill Barr had to say.
I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal. Generation I grew up in, which was the Vietnam War period, people were all concerned about spying on anti-war people and so forth by the government. And there were a lot of rules put in place to make sure that there's an adequate basis before our law enforcement agencies get involved in political surveillance. I'm not suggesting that those rules were violated, but I think it's important to look at that. And I'm not talking about the FBI necessarily, but intelligence agencies more broadly.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
I don't, I guess you could, I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
All right, so that sends shockwaves through the Democratic Party because they've been of the view that they're on the attack, that they're going to take down Trump. Trump is the bad guy. And Bill Barr, now the Attorney General of the United States, is saying, no, it seems like the bad guy might have been the people who started the investigation into Trump, and they were in the Obama administration, including all the former DOJ and FBI officials. Two weeks later, Christopher Wray, who's the head of the FBI now, gets asked the same question by New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen, and here's what he has to say about spying.
We have some news just moments ago. General Bill Barr used last month during a congressional hearing with the president, picked up.
Well, that's not the term I would use.
President picked up on.
Well, that's not the term I would use.
Thank you. So I would say that's a no to that question.
Well, I mean, look, there are lots of people have different colloquial phrases. I believe that the FBI is engaged in investigative activity, and part of investigative activity includes surveillance activity of different shapes and sizes. And to me, the key question is making sure that it's done by the book.
All right. So Christopher Wray goes against his boss, and no, I wouldn't call it spying. Donald Trump was asked earlier today if he still has confidence in Christopher Wray, who both Barr and Wray report to him. Because Christopher Wray, you heard him say, well, that's not the term I would use. Trump says, I didn't understand his answer because I thought the AG, meaning Barr, answered it perfectly. I thought it was a ridiculous answer. Of course he does. But you see, this is very, very deep. There's another issue besides what we mentioned at the opening of the show, where people, the public, are willing to believe if the Attorney General has opened up a probe into Donald Trump, the assumption is, well, he must be guilty, because otherwise, why would they bring a probe? That's just a natural reaction. Well, it's the same here. There's another thing at play here is Christopher Wray works at the FBI. He doesn't want to believe, and he was at the FBI when all this happened, that his department did something wrong, like spying illegally. So, that's not the term I would use. Now, some would suspect that, and this is why you have inspector generals, but even the inspector general, they work at the department, so they can get cozy and chummy as well, and they can cover up stuff. And that's why there's corruption probes all the time. And that's what we had in when the inspector general had to look at how the Clinton email investigation was looked at. And that's why you get corruption probes all the time, because when people work at a department, even if they're not involved in the corruption, they may have a tendency to close ranks, circle the wagons, and do what Christopher Wray is saying. Well, I don't know if we'd call it spying. not to my knowledge. And probably not to his knowledge. He probably wasn't involved. He doesn't know anything about it. But and Bill Barr probably does know about it. And what he should have said in this case, if he was just not a company man or a department man, he would not make any comment on it. He would say, I'm not involved in this. It's an ongoing investigation. I mean, these people are trained in protocol. You're not supposed to comment on ongoing investigations. And clearly, this is political. This is Jeanne Shaheen trying to gain back her mistake by... She actually should not have asked Bill Barr the question because he never mentioned spying. She did. And she says, what, so you think there was spying taking place? And she thought because they were on the offensive, he would cower down and say, no, I wouldn't say no. I was just saying something else. He said, yeah, I think there was spying. Yeah, there was. And because Ray works for Barr, he shouldn't have said what he said. But anyway, he did say that. So it highlights and it gives us another wrinkle into all that is going on right now. But the key issue is here, forget what Christopher Wray is doing because he's out of it now. We're talking now that there is an attorney. His name is Durham and is going to look into this. Now, how did all this get started? We're not going to do a deep dive into this, but I want to give you where we're headed. So we just have to quickly go back and see where we've been. Now, some think this happened when George Papadopoulos, who was just the guy, he was a 20-something guy trying to make a name for himself because he is I guess he's a guy who has he's somewhat of an academic, research on geopolitics and who the players are, and he knows something about Russia and Turkey. And anyway, he was trying to sell his services to the Trump campaign, and I think he got hired by the Trump campaign to be somewhat of a foreign policy advisor in some small area of his expertise. And once he became associated with the Trump campaign, he started getting phone calls to go, he's getting flattered to go give talks and speeches and present research papers overseas, which he does. And he gets introduced to people. There's a guy named Mitsud who gives him information about, tells him stuff about Trump and Russia, or the Russians have dirt on Hillary. And he, young guy, oh, this is great. I'm moving and shaking. They're hooking me up. They're telling me stuff. And then he has a conversation with this other guy, Alexander Downer, Australian diplomat, and they say they were having drinks. And then Downer reports this back that Papadopoulos is saying stuff that the Russians have dirt on Hillary Clinton. And Papadopoulos has been saying all along, he even wrote a book about it. I was set up. I reported him to the FBI and Mueller and testified to Congress about him spying on me. He was a moron. Uh-oh. So this whole idea that they started an investigation because some kid was having a discussion who worked for the campaign, drunk with this guy, who doesn't mention it to them for 2 months, that this launches this massive FBI. It kind of strains credibility. All right, so that's where it is. And then you get into this Christopher Steele, and more is coming out about it. He supposedly is one of these like Peter Strzok guys that Strzok, whatever his name is, that really hates Trump, is on the record for hating Trump's got to be stopped. And apparently was hired by Fusion GPS, who was on the payroll of Hillary Clinton. It's all pretty obvious that this is, at least to me, based on the publicly available information, that this was what you would call opposition party research, or even just made up stuff to make the opposition candidate look bad. The difference is it got funneled through to Department of Justice, the FBI, to Nellie Orr, through, she worked at Fusion GPS, her husband worked, at the government, Bruce Orr. It finds its way, is the centerpiece, whatever Steele wrote, into, maybe the guy who runs Fusion GPS wrote it, into a FISA warrant, which is just crazy. But then we find out just the other day that Christopher Steele, who was just hell-bent on being against Trump, in October, just a few weeks before the election, goes to the State Department. I don't know why he's talking to this woman, Kavalek, and he's telling her this stuff's got to get out there. I guess he's trying to get wide dissemination of his dossier, and he's already, peddled it to the media. He's peddled it to the FBI. He's now peddling it at the State Department, and he's telling this woman, and she's handwriting these notes and then types them up and sends them to the FBI, that Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, has been to Prague trying to set up a meeting with the Russians, and that they're working some deal out of the Russian embassy out of Miami, of which there isn't one. And she sends all this stuff over to the FBI, and yet they still use it because she's indicating this guy's off his rocker. And interestingly enough, remember I was saying how Christopher Wray, the current FBI director, we wouldn't call it spying. I wouldn't call it spying. He classified the written and typewritten notes of this woman Kavalek, who met with Christopher Steele in April just this year. Now, why would he do that? I mean, this doesn't make any sense unless he's also concerned that this looks really bad. Because if, and it seems to be, I can't see any other, from what's out in the public, that the Steele dossier is just made up. In fact, Comey once said that it was unverified and salacious. Well, if it's unverified and you can't get a warrant unless you verify the documents that form part of the FISA application, you just said that you presented an unverified bit of information, to which he backpedaled and said, well, it wasn't just the Steele dossier, that was just part of it. Yeah, and the other part of it was the reports in the media about this Steele dossier. You see how this is pretty obvious. It's not that I figured this out. Everyone has figured this out, is paying attention to it. It's just that it doesn't get reported in the media because, in a sense, many of them were part and parcel of this because all they cared about was reporting on taking down Trump. It's almost like it's the same thing you see with people reporting what they want to report on because they want to believe China's going to crush the dollar or silver is set to skyrocket. So they just promote a certain portion or certain set of facts without giving you the other side of the facts. Now, there's a difference. If you're a gold pumper, a silver pumper, a Bitcoin pumper, whatever pumper you are, well, that's your job. You're not supposed to be objective. You're supposed to pump the gold. You're supposed to pump the whatever narrative it is. The problem is in journalism is they're just pumpers for whatever, either a political party or a political narrative. And so, of course, they don't report on any of this stuff. But unfortunately, they claim that they're journalists, and journalists are supposed to look at all available information. And in fact, a good journalist is going to second guess and question information that is just being bandied about. And that's what as a gold analyst or a silver analyst or a cryptocurrency analyst or economic analyst, that's what I try to do. I'm not saying I'm a perfect journalist, but what I'm saying is I do try to look at and question either, is there a source for that particular piece of information? Is there anything that might contradict the information that we're getting? They don't care, because obviously this type of journalism, or whatever I do, is not what really most people want to hear. Most people want to hear 100%, it's headed in this direction, Trump's going down, silver set to skyrocket, gold's going to go, dollar's going to collapse. They don't want to hear, well, on the one hand this and on the other hand that. It's probably nothing. That doesn't get headlines. That doesn't get people emotionally charged. That doesn't get people all ready to go and ready to click. And you saw CNN, MSNBC, when they had the Russian-Trump collusion thing and he's going down and he's going down, that was driving ratings. Just like when I put up a silver set to skyrocket video. I could just babble about nothing. I'll get more views than when I do analysis like this. So it's a money game. It's obvious. That's exactly what that's the media people want to consume. And a real journalist is going to ask, and by the way, some of the journalists at these mainstream media outlets either so brainwashed themselves, or they're not even allowed to look at something else. They're there. It's like, okay, you go out and you pump Trump is going down, and here are the 5 talking points about what Mueller's got on him or what Mueller may have on him. They don't want to hear, oh, but maybe the whole thing is a farce. No, they don't want to break that story because that's not what their viewers want to hear. All right, so that's how it started, either through something Papadopoulos might have said or information coming from Steele. I think that it's the same thing they did to Bernie Sanders, the Democratic Party, with their help with the Obama administration, wanted to make sure that Hillary Clinton won, because that was the a way of keeping everyone in power. Because if Hillary Clinton won, then all the people in the Obama administration, Sally Yates, all of them, they all would have kept their jobs and they would all have been able to pursue their agendas. And it's unfortunate they have to have an election every 4 years, but hey, 8 years of Obama, 4 more years of Hillary, another 4 more years of Hillary. We got this game going for 20 years, 16 years. So that's what I think happened, and it's pretty obvious. And that's probably why they want Biden, because Biden is probably their best hope to try to resurrect the old gang and also to try to stop whatever damage Trump and Barr may be doing right now. Because if Trump wins a second term, well, then he starts to control more and more of the apparatus of government, the DOJ, the FBI. He's already appointed 104, I believe, 106 judges, something like 64 in the district court, 39 in the circuit. He's got 2 Supreme Court justices. He'll get another 1 or 2 if he's in for 8 years. So that's what they're really... And I guess they figure Biden is the easiest one to stop him. Now, where are we headed with this? This is very, very interesting. Because we have to look at Comey, Rosenstein, Clapper, Brennan, Barr, what they're all doing. Now, Comey's been out there. He's made $2 million selling his book and claiming the Democrats got to win and we got to get rid of Trump. And so he's making all these rounds on the TV shows, and he says, I should never have said Hillary was extremely careless. Well, he never should have given that July 5th, 2016 press conference. He gives a press conference and he lays out everything that she did wrong. That was a mistake. As I mentioned, that goes against protocol. But then he says, well, I really wish I was never involved. I don't know what he's talking about. But really, what he did when said she was extremely careless, that was on the suggestion of, what's his name, McCabe. Because McCabe was a big Hillary fan, and his wife was running for some position, I was a Congress or something in Virginia, and she was taking Clinton money. And he thought, well, if we say she was extremely careless as opposed to gross negligence, which is the statutory word in the that would get Hillary arrested, they changed it to extreme careless. Now he's saying, I wish he would have said something like really careless. I don't know. He's really not making any sense, but he's acting like he has the moral high ground. Now here, he's saying other things too. He's criticizing Rod Rosenstein. He's criticizing Barr for not having the moral fortitude to stand up to Donald Trump because he says that Trump has a way of eating your soul out. You know, he's tweeting of himself standing amongst the redwoods in the crowd. You got to remember, he's not by himself. He's got a publicist with him taking pictures of him staring up at the redwoods. But anyway, he's saying you can't have a president who's a chronic liar. The president can't be someone who lies constantly. He's trying to give this whole, I'm the good guy, I'm the white knight, I see Trump man, orange man bad. I was the man at the FBI, and I was in shock when I was fired. Even though he did the sneakiest little move, he went to Trump and he told him, "Yeah, Russian dossier. Yeah, you see, they're saying all this stuff about you, you hiring Russian whores, and they're peeing on their bed. You see, but it's all salacious and unverified. But yeah, see." And then he goes back to Clapper and Brennan, and then they say, "Okay, now that you've told him, we can go to the media with this and say that this story is out there." I mean, that's a real. I mean, he's not He wasn't there to help Trump out, and he expects Trump to keep him on as the FBI director. Now we're going to get into Rosenstein, because Rosenstein is the most curious character in this whole thing. So, not only was Comey trashing Rosenstein and Barr for not standing up, he's saying the Justice Department ought to take a serious look at charging Trump when he's no longer president. No, I think people are going to be taking a close look at James Comey. Now, Rosenstein, who... Let's talk about Rosenstein. Rosenstein was appointed assistant to Deputy Attorney General, in a sense, acting Attorney General with respect to the Russian collusion investigation. Now, old Rod Rosenstein, he is the one who wrote a memo to Donald Trump suggesting or recommending that James Comey be fired because of the way he conducted himself during the Clinton email investigation. As I mentioned, that whole press conference he gave, there were two major flaws. He's not supposed to make a charging recommendation, and nor is he supposed to lay out a bunch of stuff that someone did and then not charge them. But yet, when Comey gets fired on the basis of Rod Rosenstein's memo, Comey goes and leaks the notes that he took in his meeting with Trump to a friend of his. He testified to Congress of this, so that that person could leak those notes to the New York Times and the Washington Post for the purpose of getting a special counsel appointed to investigate Donald Trump for Russian collusion and for obstruction of justice, part and parcel for firing him. The other thing about Rosenstein is, we told you that Comey signed the first FISA warrant on the basis of all that salacious and unverified Steele dossier and the news reports. Rosenstein signed the fourth one. So Rosenstein is sitting in the Deputy Attorney General's seat, recommends that Comey, a guy who signed a FISA warrant just like he did, be fired. Then, the reason that Rosenstein is the guy who appoints the special counsel Mueller is because Jeff Sessions says, I'm recuse myself because he had been involved in the Trump campaign and therefore he felt he was conflicted. Meanwhile, Rosenstein is even more conflicted because Rosenstein has fired Comey, which is one of the charges of obstruction of justice, and yet he's hiring a special counsel to look into obstruction of justice, which he helped create because he recommended Comey be fired, and into the Russia probe, which he also was involved in as a person who signed the FISA warrant. You go one step further and you find out that early on in the administration, Rosenstein says that he would wear a wire, and he's telling this to other FBI people, whether in jest or not, in order to see if they can catch Trump acting like insane so they can get rid of him under the 25th Amendment. Very, very curious that Rod Rosenstein, who seems to be part and parcel of this whole scheme, he ingratiates himself into the whole scheme, though, but fires Comey. But maybe he fired Comey or recommended firing Comey because he knew that that might put Trump in position for obstruction of justice. And then he appoints a special counsel to look into all this. Now, remember, the special counsel reports to to Rosenstein. Now, do you really think for 2 years Rosenstein is getting information about collusion? I don't think so, because the end result of all this was there was no collusion. So Rosenstein never said to Mueller, hey, there's nothing there. What are you doing? What are you doing? And we know what he was doing. He was going after Manafort, Cohen, Stone, Corsi, for things that had nothing to do with Russian collusion. And good old Rod's letting him do it. This has nothing to do with Russian collusion. So Paul Manafort lies on his loan applications, and I think Cohen did the same thing. Cohen doesn't pay taxes on some taxi medallions that he owns. Manafort doesn't register as a foreign agent for some work he did in the Ukraine. I mean, these are things that have nothing to do with Russian collusion. And Rosenstein's like, yeah, go get him. Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi have no idea what they have to do with anything, and yet this went on. So Rod Rosenstein also appears, like Christopher Wray, the current FBI director, to be part and parcel of this whole scheme. And so does Jeff Sessions. I mean, I'm recused myself. Well, if he knew he was going to recuse himself, then why did he take the job in the first place? Because it wasn't like this was unknown, like this was an issue. All right, so Rod Rosenstein, wearing the wire, being against Trump. When this news comes out that Rod Rosenstein, according to, again, documents that get produced, that he can't deny because there's like 5 witnesses that say he did. Oh, I was just kidding. Trump then summons him to the White House. Everyone's thinking, well, that's it for Rod. Rod's going to get himself fired. Rod has taken a swipe or has been found conspiring against Trump, and Trump's going to fire him. And Trump says, you know what, let's cancel that meeting. And then I think Trump did a very, I say, mafia-inspired move. Well, what he did was he just let him hang for a couple of weeks. And then he said to him, hey, Rod, why don't I got to go to where he was going? I don't know. Why don't you get on the plane? We could talk then. Then we could be by ourselves. Well, who knows what they said on the plane. Get off the plane, and he and Rod are buds. I mean, he's not firing Rod, and Rod's still his deputy attorney general. Even though he's going to wear a wire, he appoints a special counsel, Mueller. Now, Mueller then, the other part of this is Mueller then on his team, he makes no bones about it. He appoints a lawyer from the Clinton Foundation. He appoints another guy, Weissman, who had worked with him on other things. He basically employed 10, 12 what Trump calls angry Democrats. So it wasn't a special counsel, independent counsel, one in which they were worried about a conflict. There was one in which they wanted to go after him, and that's pretty obvious. And even though they went after him, they didn't get him. But here's now, it's interesting, this is the odd case of Rod Rosenstein. That's why this all plays into what's going to happen now with John Durham as he investigates further. Let's see what we got next. All right. Look at this picture. This is William Barr and Rod Rosenstein. And they look like they're yucking it up, and they are buds. Now, Rod Rosenstein, after he probably was sweating when he got on the plane with Trump and then got off the plane, and you guys still got your job, then said he's going to quit. When they appointed an interim attorney general before Barr got appointed, Rod was out of there. And he was going to be out of there, I think, before Barr even came on. And maybe he was going to be there for like a week. And Barr took Rosenstein aside and he said, hey, Rod, why don't you hang out for a little while? Why don't we finish up this Mueller? It would be really helpful if you can help me finish up. And Rod says, oh, okay. All right, I'll stay. And then Rod ends up, when the Mueller report comes back. Now think if Rod wasn't there. When the Mueller report comes back and it says, no collusion, but we couldn't exonerate Trump on obstruction of justice. Now that's ridiculous. It's the same thing that Comey did. You don't then say, but here's 200 pages about how we could have, but we didn't want to, or we couldn't, we just didn't feel like it. You guys make the decision. Well, first of all, Barr never should have published that report because that was a violation of how the department should work. You don't fail to charge somebody, but then tell everybody all the things you looked at that were never litigated, never had anyone had opportunity to contradict. You just say, there's all the information, it's all pretty bad, but we didn't want to do anything about it. But anyway, Barr published it. Barr's got it out there. Barr's unredacted it, given to Congress, and now they want to hold him in contempt because he won't give them, which he can't give them because it's against the law. The only thing that's been redacted in the documents they can look at is the grand jury testimony. That's a separate issue. They're still fighting an old battle there, trying to go after Bill Barr. But back to Rod Rosenstein. Now, Rod is yucking it up here with Bill Barr. This is just a couple of days ago. This is after Rod Rosenstein and Bill Barr concluded, nope, no obstruction of justice. So it seems like Barr kept Rosenstein around for this explicit purpose of, hey, look, we know you were involved in all this, but you're not going to blame this on just me, that I'm going to absolve. I'm going to say Trump didn't obstruct justice. You were the guy who oversaw Mueller all this time. You make that decision with me. And he did. Now, what's interesting is it seems like Rod is very, very happy here that Rod is retiring now, having done his job. Now, this is total speculation. My speculation is Rod was part of the whole internal DOJ, FBI plan to get rid of Trump. It all was working like a charm. He has Comey fired, then he hires Mueller to get him on obstruction of justice. He's going to wear a wire, get Trump on the 25th Amendment. And then when the whole thing fell apart and a lot of information came out, and Rosenstein knew that Trump had seen all the declassified materials, he knew he was screwed. He knew that he was going to get fired. And that's when I think he probably had a deal made. And that deal was, Rod, you tell us what you know about all these people, and you help us conclude the Mueller probe. Then you can go on your way. Now, listen to what Rosenstein said the other day about James Comey. This is what happens. They get each other to turn on each other. Here is, I wish you could, this picture, he's smiling ear to ear. He's just as happy as he was with Bill Barr. Here's Rod Rosenstein the other day talking about our friend James Comey.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Don. I'm very grateful for your long-standing support, and I'm very happy to be back home in Maryland.
He's happy.
But now the former director seems to be acting as a partisan pundit, selling books and earning speaking fees while speculating about the strength of my character and the fate of my immortal soul. I kid you not. That is disappointing.
So, he had some more choice words for James Comey. It seems like Rosenstein has flipped and is on the side of the Barr Trump. Now, just to point out, Barr is not buddies with Trump. They're trying to make him out to be like Trump has got Bill Barr working as his personal attorney. They use these words, hand-picked. Well, every attorney that you appoint, the attorney general, is hand-picked. Barr is his own guy. He didn't know Trump before. He was the attorney general before Trump was president 20, 30 years ago under George Herbert Walker Bush, not under W. And he is what appears to be, from what I've seen in these people that work at the upper echelons of the DOJ and the FBI, there's probably three types. One type is a type that just does their job and they just love working at the bureau, they love working at the DOJ, they're career bureaucrats. They just think being involved in this stuff is the best. And they bring all the professionalism to it and they just love it. Then there's types that are in there and they're just political hacks. And they're in there because they're political appointees. They're in there because they want to pursue an agenda. And then there's the other type that they feel themselves as stewards of they're like the first group. They really enjoy working there. They love it. It's professional, but they also feel that it's their job to make sure that the bureau or the administration or the office never loses the status that it has, because they've tied part and parcel of their reputations into working at this place, and they don't want to see it go down. And these are the types of people like Bill Barr and perhaps this John Durham guy who will, unlike some who will circle the wagons and protect the people in the Bureau, these are the types of people who will go after those people, even if they're buddies with them, because they think it's a higher calling to preserve the integrity of the Bureau. And that's where I think Barr is. This is just my own, it's speculation, and you can be psychobabble. It's just how I look at it. That Barr, and from what I know about Durham, they're the types that like to make sure that they leave the place better than when they came. And that's why I believe, not that they'll be vindictive, but to the objective observer, it's obvious what they did. They rigged the Hillary Clinton email investigation. I don't see how you can say otherwise. She kept the argument, oh, what about her emails? And it's not about her emails. She purposely set up a server, private server, totally against the guidelines. She obstructed justice when they asked for the emails. She destroyed them, deleted them, destroyed devices. She was running probably Clinton Foundation stuff through there. And they just, no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against her. Of course they would. They bring a case on a lot less. She was running that server for 3 years. Anyway, so what I think is happening is that they've seen enough. They're probably infuriated that this has happened. And if they have to prosecute people, I believe they're gonna prosecute people, because to me it's obvious. I've been following this for 3 years. I've read books on it, and it's interesting. You just don't see both sides of the story in the general news. You don't see it on CBS, ABC, MSNBC, CNN. They just don't report on it. And now they're probably going to have to report on it. What they're trying to do with this Barr thing, by getting him in contempt, is what they're trying to say is keep the pressure on him. And now they'll probably go after John Durham. Who is he? He's probably some scoundrel. Look up stuff. But the real point is, the story is, there was no collusion. And here's the thing. If the FBI is so good at their jobs, and all these former intelligence people, how come after 2 years they can conclude, even though they wanted to get Trump, that there wasn't any? Well, either they're totally incompetent, or they had to just finally admit it. But the point is, they took 2 years to do that, and think of the political damage. Even though they didn't bring him down, that they did. They managed probably to win the midterm elections in the Congress on the basis of that, because there was still the doubt, when they probably knew from the beginning there was no Russian collusion. But the Mueller investigation continued for 2 years, and now they're still trying to continue it. They're still trying to subpoena people to come in. They're still trying to hold Barr in contempt. Well, really, the march of history now is, it looks like the president has survived. He's in charge of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and now he has control over that apparatus. And I don't think he's, they're trying to say now he's weaponizing. No, he's not. It was weaponized against him in a very big way in conjunction with the media. And now he's hired an attorney, has an attorney general who, along with John Durham and the Inspector General Horowitz, are going to look into this. Now, they may not end up indicting anyone. I don't want to get people excited that this means that all the people that were involved are going to get indicted and frog-marched, and Obama and Hillary Clinton are going to get arrested. No, I'm just suggesting now that this is the natural play of things. And let's see what you guys are thinking as to what's going to happen here. I suspect most people think nothing is going to happen. I'm in the middle on this one, just like I am on most things. I do think something is going to happen. I do think there will be a change somewhat in public perception. You'll still have the fanatics insisting that this is all, it's not true and Trump really is a Russian agent. But for the most part, I think there'll be a shift in people understanding what actually did happen, because The documents are out there as to what happened. And they try to change what happened by saying that now Trump has obstructed justice when the real story was supposedly Trump had colluded with Russia. All right, let's see what you all are saying in the comments. All right, let's see what we got here. Phil is here. Canista. Thanks, Lewis, says Phil, sorting out all the crap that goes on in Washington. I simply don't have the time, and mainstream corporate news is an agenda, and that's the real fake news. That's exactly right. I mean, if you spend any time, what's frustrating is that the mainstream media, look, that's their job. They get paid a lot. I don't get paid any money. They get paid a lot of money. But again, they're not paid a lot of money to investigate stuff and to give you the truth as they might uncover it. They're there just to pump a narrative. That's why you gotta be very careful. Even in your alternative media, they're there to pump a narrative too. They get paid to pump narratives. I get paid to pump mugs. Thank you. All right. William Justice is here. Fiona, Ann, 2 Phillips, tossing Molotovs. Criminals control the DOJ, FBI, break them up. Yep. Deep state thugs. Set this here. DB stupid. When Comey starts talking about people being soul eaters, it's a leap to think that Comey might have stepped outside the law to try and bring down Trump. Yeah, I think that's probably what he did. Seth is ready with his Litecoin moonshot. Ken Singsta. I come here for the analysis. Oh, good. That's what I try to give. All right. And Wolfman says, I have little faith anything will happen, but I can dream. Yes. That's exactly, well, most people are looking at it. Fiona Whalen, Smaulgld, do you think Biden's shenanigans with Ukraine and his son will see the light of day? Absolutely. I think what's interesting is both the Democrats and the Trump administration want Biden. The Democrats want Biden because it's a way of restoring Obama and trying to just stop the disaster that might happen if Barr and Durham go all the way, and it goes all the way up to Clinton and to Obama. They can stop that. Biden gets in, fires Barr, and they have a new attorney general and bring back Eric Holder, and that's probably why they want to get Biden in. Trump wants to run against Biden because Biden is adult. I mean, Biden's just a walking gaffe, and as an independent candidate, he never got far. He's not popular with the Democrats. He's not charismatic. He's just a guy, and he is Creepy Joe. I mean, what they've done, I've noticed that they've gone against him so far on his putting his head and doing all kinds of snuggly stuff with women. But he does some creepy stuff with the little kids too. They're not really focused on that. And I think they're going to save that for the trash time in September and October next year. And of course, there's the Schweitzer thing with him in China and him and his son in Ukraine. I said a couple of days ago on Twitter, they're going to start the whole China-Biden collusion story. I don't think Biden has a shot. Actually, I don't think any of the Democratic candidates have a shot because they all have significant weaknesses. You can't take Elizabeth Warren seriously after that Pocahontas thing. Cory Booker, when he's wide-eyed and doing his Spartacus thing, that's very hard to take seriously. It's hard to take What Me Worry, 37-year-old Mayor Pete Buttigieg, whatever his name is. He's like a child. I'm not saying there's nothing to do with their politics. It's just who they are. They don't really, and Biden is serious, the most serious candidate because he was the vice president. So that gives him a certain stature, but he's still Joe. So I'm not sure where they're going to go with it. Kamala Harris comes across as, I don't know what she comes across as. She's not likable. She tries to act like she's cool and she's young and she's not, and she's neither. And who else do they have? Now, Bernie Sanders, he has a shot, but the problem that they have with is the Democratic Party won't give me a shot. They won't, because the problem with Bernie Sanders is he'll never get the corporate backing because he is a real socialist. He's not going to take the money from the big corporations. Well, all the media is beholden to the big corporations, and that's why we saw Hillary knocked him out. So he's in second place, but he's got no shot because they're not going to give it to him. And then you got Mark Cuban wants to run, and then you got all these independents that want to run. Bill Weld is going to run is against Trump. The only one who has any stature, even if it's negative, is in some respects, is Trump. And Trump also has positive stature. I saw a poll today that says Trump's approval rating has been the most steady of any president in history. It makes sense because he has that, what you call the base. They don't care what he does, and they'll always be with him. And so all Trump really has to win over is 5-10% of the middle, which is not that hard to do. And then he wins, because I don't see any Democrat who has the national stature, seriousness, charisma, whatever it takes. I mean, Biden, that's why Biden's winning. But sorry, Biden is not going to inspire the Democratic base. I mean, he has a lot of baggage in his background that goes against the progressive ethos that inspires the Democrats. So they're going to vote for him by default? Maybe, but maybe they just won't show up. It's a long-winded answer to your question, Fiona. All right, what else do we have? Nothing else. Oh, here we go. Jack, Smaulgld, I wish I was more educated on this topic to input something somewhat intellectual, but here we are. I just come along and listen. You don't have to. Fiona, Smaulgld, I live in New York City and people understand big fat nothing. Well, that I understand. I was from New York. All right. Well, that's about it. I want to thank everyone for joining. Tomorrow we'll get back into the crypto news. I also want to do and get your thoughts on Trump and China, the tariff situation. So tomorrow we're going to spend some time with Trump and tariffs, and of course, crypto news, some gold and silver news, and of course, some mug news. We've got to get some mug news going. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you tomorrow.